All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And for the second part of the show, we're going to go over the Las Vegas Raiders schedule for 2024. I'll give you my early win-loss predictions for them. So let's get into their schedule, change a few things here. So the Raiders, they started off the year, it was brutal. And they looked like they were going to finish with one of the worst records in football. And then they end up letting go of Josh McDaniels, promoting Antonio Pierce to become the interim head coach. And now he is the full-time head coach. This will be his first full season as the head coach of the Raiders. The Raiders really did respond to him when they made that change. And they had that big win against the Chiefs on Christmas where they did not complete a pass after the first quarter, I believe. They had 2 defensive touchdowns in the game. They really, and let's not forget, they blew out the Chargers. They scored 60 points on them on Thursday night. They made Brandon Staley lose his job, which I talked about yesterday. So, they did play better, and they ended up finishing 8-9. The defense played better. AidanO'Connell was okay. So, give Antonio Pierce credit for keeping that team together and at least, turning the season around and them finishing with a more respectable record. Because, like I said, they started off rough. It looked like they were going to be one of the worst teams in football. Well, actually, they did win their first game of the season. They won against the Broncos, but after that, it wasn't good. So the Raiders made the right decision, and you had the players like Devontae Adams and Max Crosby. They were pleading for the Raiders to keep Antonio Pierce as the head coach, and the Raiders did that. So we'll see how it goes. Antonio Pierce's first season, and they start off the season against the Chargers. I think they'll split with the Chargers. I think I said the Chargers would win this game. I think the Raiders can win this game, but I would lean towards the Chargers. So the Raiders will start off 0-1. Then they play against the Ravens week 2. I think that's a loss as well. So they don't get off to the best start, but I think they turn it around. I think they win against the Panthers, and I'm going to say that they upset the Browns. Because I think this is a game that Deshaun Watson could struggle in. The Raiders, their defense is going to be better. And I think they play well at home. So I actually would lean towards taking the Raiders. So I think the Raiders, they even out their record. They get to 2-2. Then against the Broncos, I don't think the Broncos are going to be very good. I think, with the Broncos being at home, they could definitely win this game. But I'd probably lean towards the Raiders. Now, the other thing, too, is I've gone through the first 5 games here. So the Raiders at this point are 3-2. I'm assuming that Gardner Minshew will end up being the starter. I think that's who should be the starter. Now, if AidanO'Connell goes out there and he impresses and, the Raiders lean towards him being the starter, then go for it. But I'm going to say that Gardner Minshew ends up being the starter. So that's my thought. So at this point, Raiders are 3-2. I think the Steelers is a loss. Yeah, this is a rough stretch here. I think they can beat the Steelers. I think they could definitely win this game. But I lean towards the Steelers winning that. The Rams, I think that's a loss. The Chiefs, they could split against the Chiefs. They did last year. And they were winning the first game at home. And then the Chiefs came back. So they could split with the Chiefs. It's possible. Give Mahomes and the Chiefs problems again. They do play on Black Friday. Last year they played on Christmas. This year they play on Black Friday. So maybe they upset the Chiefs in Arrowhead again on a holiday. Well, if you want to call Black Friday holiday. It's a part of, it's Thanksgiving weekend, basically. So they could split with the Chiefs. The Chiefs could sweep them. I think the Chiefs are going to be much better this year offensively than they were last year. So, the Chiefs could probably sweep them. Then against the Bengals, yeah, that's another tough game. I think I could see the Raiders losing that. Against the Dolphins, another tough game. I could see them losing that. Actually, they had a close game against Miami last year. I think that was a 1-score game. But, yeah, that's a tough stretch there between Week 6 and Week 11. Then Week 12 against the Broncos at home, I think that's a win. Then they got the Chiefs again. Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's either going to be a split or a Chiefs sweep. So, but maybe the Raiders upset them. Who knows? In Arrowhead, like I said, like they did last year against the Buccaneers. I mean, that's a game they could win. I think with the Bucs being at home, I'd probably lean towards Tampa, but the Raiders could win that. Against the Falcons, being at home, they could win that, but I don't know. Against the Jags, I think that's a game they could definitely win, but that's another toss-up. Then they're at the Saints, so they'll be facing Derek Carr, and Derek Carr I think is probably going to want to stick it the to the Saints or to the Raiders. So, um, maybe the Raiders drop that one, and then I'd say they get the Chargers week 18. So I actually don't have the Raiders finishing with the best record. So I had them against the Panthers, the Browns, I guess the Broncos twice, the Chargers, maybe the Jags they get a win against the Bucks. Maybe they win that. Maybe they somehow split with the Chiefs. I don't know. I think it's a tough schedule. I think maybe they get 7 wins. That's kind of what I see right now is 7. But like I said, that stretch between week 6 to week 11, that's tough. Then you got the Broncos week 12, but then you got the Chiefs again. Yeah, it's tough. It's tough, but again, this is just very early predictions. I mean, we don't know who the starting quarterback's going to be, and also the backfield. How is the backfield going to be? Because there's no more Josh Jacobs. You got Zamir White. They signed Alexander Madison. I mean, I'd probably lean towards giving Zamir White the bulk of the carries just because, in his role, filling in for Josh Jacobs last year, he was good. Ran for over 140 yards against the Chiefs on Christmas, and believe me, I remember that number because I went against him in the fantasy playoffs. And he got most of those yards towards the end of the game. So if he didn't have some of those big runs, we'd be having a different conversation. But I'm always going to bring up that game, and let's see how Zamir White does if he is the lead back. But it might be more of a committee. But yeah, Zamir White, it's anytime I hear that name, my mood changes because he's one of the reasons why I did not win my fantasy championship last year in my main league. So, but it's a new year, and hopefully things change. And already we're talking about how we're going to do the draft order and things like that. So I mean, we're getting there, little by little. Robert Bruce in the chat, he says salute GSMC. Well, you know what? We salute you, Robert. Thank you for tuning in. But yeah, with the Raiders' schedule here, it's tough at some points. I mean, 8-9 last year, and then I said seven wins this year. That's that's going backwards. I mean, by one game, but yeah, I mean the schedule is tough. So, again, they could surprise us. Maybe get some. I mean, they play well at home. So, against the Falcons, I mean, we'll see how Kirk Cousins is with the Falcons late in the season. They could get that win. The Jags, I mean, I think the Jags will bounce back from last year, but the Raiders could give them problems at home. It's a tough schedule. You got the Chiefs twice. You got the Ravens. You got the Dolphins. I mean, well, yeah, you got the entirety of the AFC North. You got the Rams. Yeah, it's a tough schedule. So we'll see if they're up for the challenge. But yeah, I think 7 wins. I think that's fair for the Raiders. But who knows? But Gardner, I mean, they got Gardner Minshew and AidanO'Connell. Those are their options at quarterback. And again, AidanO'Connell did okay for them. Gardner Minshew, I mean, the Colts came very close to making the playoffs. If they didn't have that drop on 4th down, who knows? Maybe they get a touchdown and they end up winning against the Texans and winning by 1 point. But yeah, that just that didn't happen. So, and I think Gardner Minshew is a good option to have. To kind of be like that. Well, honestly, I don't even know what I would call it because I don't think he's the long-term answer, but I don't think they have the long-term answer on the roster. I don't think AidanO'Connell is the long-term answer. So, I mean, they could, like I talked about in the last segment, they could go out and maybe get another quarterback, maybe get Dak. And I think if Dak ended up going to the Raiders, that'd be a good situation for him because they got a lot of pass catchers on this team. Devontae Adams, Jacoby Myers. They signed Michael Gallup, like I said, Trey Tucker. They drafted Brock Bowers. They got a ton of playmakers on this offense. The running game, let's see how's it. I think Zamir White, he showed you that he could be, an effective back if he gets a full workload. But let's see that over the course of a full season. So that's my a question mark there. But I mean, I think the Raiders is a good spot, and the defense is going to be improved. So, look, maybe they win some games in that tough stretch between Week 6 and Week 11. And the other thing too, again, it's very early. Injuries can happen. As much as we don't want to see injuries happen, they do. So, there's always that. But maybe they win games they're not supposed to, like against the Chiefs. They did that last year. They could do that again. Who knows? But I think 7 wins. That's probably what I'd have them around. So, but let me know what you guys think. How many games do you think the Raiders will win in 2024? Let me know in the comments. So, before we go to break, just want to remind you guys once again to tip or donate and get your comments recognized. Make sure to go to the following link. That is GSMCPodcast.net. Again, that really helps the show, makes the show more interactive between myself, the host, and you guys, the viewers. Again, that is GSMCPodcast.net. And as always, it is displayed on the ticker at the bottom of the show segment down below. So, when we come back from our second break of the show, we will talk about Justin Jefferson and his comments on Kirk Cousins signing with the Atlanta Falcons. So, that is what we will do when we come back from our next break. So, with that being said, stick around. And we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast.